guys are on candid camera, just so you know. All right, so the second half of this lesson involves the other three trig ratios. There are really six. Three basic ones and then three more. And these are called the reciprocal ratios. The reciprocal ratios. So you get your first three, and then you have the reciprocal ratios. All right, so the first one, if you look here, is the inverse or the reciprocal of the sine. And again, you would have had these in geometry. Whether or not you remember them is the question. And this is the cosecant. The cosecant. So the cosecant of x equals 1 over the sine of x. The abbreviation for cosecant is CSC. And you can look on your calculator, but you're not going to find a cosecant button. And the reason you're not going to find a cosecant button is because you really don't need the button. It's not really necessary if you know what's going on. Is that blue light on? Okay, good. So if the sine is the opposite over the hypotenuse, which, by the way, you have to have memorized, then the reciprocal of that, the cosecant, has to be the hypotenuse over the opposite. Okay, so sine opposite over hypotenuse. What's the reciprocal? Hypotenuse over opposite. So that's what the cosecant is, which, by the way, then you could also think of it this way. If the cosecant is 1 over the sine, then the sine must also be 1 over the cosecant. They're reciprocals of each other. So if the cosecant's 1 over the sine, then the sine's got to be 1 over the cosecant. They are reciprocals. All right, the second one is the reciprocal of the cosine, and that is the secant. How can you keep straight which is which? Each main function has a co that goes with it. So we just had sine, and then we had not cosine, because cosine's a basic function, one of the three main ones, but cosecant. Well, our second main one is cosecant, so we've got to have one without the co, and that's secant. And so again, because the cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, then the secant has to be the hypotenuse over the adjacent. And again, you wouldn't say SEC, just like you wouldn't say tan, just like you wouldn't say sin, just like you wouldn't say cos, you would still say secant when speaking. All right? SEC is the basketball conference that probably the national champions will come from. But other than that, you don't say SEC. So again, just like the other one, because the secant is 1 over the cosine, then the cosine is also 1 over the secant. Again, for that same angle. Remember, the x there represents an angle. So the secant of a certain angle, let's say 10 degrees, would be 1 over the cosine of 10 degrees. Or the cosine of 10 degrees would be 1 over the secant of 10 degrees. They are reciprocals. So then the last one, if you've got then everything with this co, you have tangent. This is the one that goes together with cotangent. Tangent and cotangent. All right, and we abbreviate the cotangent with COT. Again, you wouldn't say cot, you would say cotangent. Because the tangent is opposite over adjacent, then the cotangent reciprocal has to be adjacent over opposite. And so the tangent of x would also be 1 over the cotangent of x. All right, now you got to know those, because whenever you're given any of these three trig ratios, you have to know what they are, what over what, for the ratio if you're asked that. And you have to know these relationships if you're going to find either angles or ratios. So we've already used our calculator to figure out the ratio in decimal form when we input an angle. However, now we don't have a secant button, we don't have a cosecant button, and we don't have a cotangent button. So we have to know the relationship to be able to use our calculator. And we also used our calculators to figure out angles by using our sine to the -1 button to get an angle, or our cosine to the -1 button to get an angle, or our tangent to the -1 button to get an angle. So again, when they give us secant or cosecant or cotangent, in order to use our calculator to get an angle, we've got to know the relationship. We've got to know that the sine is 1 over the cosecant. We have to know that the secant is 1 over the cosine. We have to know that the cotangent is 1 over the tangent. So again, just something you should have in your memory, something you should have memorized, something you should know. Any questions so far? Anybody? Any questions? Okay. All right, so then let's get down to our calculator. So go ahead and get them out. You're going to need them. And again, you got to learn your calculator. Every calculator is different. Syntax of every calculator is different. Hopefully everybody's got their calculator with them. Anybody missing a calculator today? Anybody? Everybody's good? All right, so let's first off deal with finding angles. Finding angles when given a reciprocal ratio. All right, so just try to follow along. Make your notes clear so that you can go back and look at your notes and try to figure out what to do in this kind of a situation. All right, so when you're looking to find angles, you've got to start off with the reciprocal ratio. So here in this problem, they told me I need to find the secant of angle Q. So I'm immediately thinking, what is the reciprocal ratio for the secant? As soon as you get settled, Allison, if you just put your homework on my desk. So you're thinking, what is the reciprocal ratio for the secant? Hopefully you say cosine. But again, you have to know that. If you don't know that, then you're not going to get the problem correct. So again, you got to memorize the reciprocal of the sine is the cosecant, the reciprocal of the cosine is the secant, and the reciprocal of the tangent is the cotangent. Okay, but what ends up happening then is this becomes an equation. Now this is for when you're finding the angle. It'll be a little different procedure when we're finding the ratio. But that's your equation. So our next step is to sub in 4.7531 for secant Q. Sub in 4.7531 for secant Q. So here's what the next step would look like. I'm going to use black. You can use blue if you want. So cosine of theta, right, this part of the equation, equals, the top is a 1. And in the bottom, we're going to sub in 4.7531 for the secant of Q, because that's what secant Q is. Okay, at this point, if you'll just pause for a moment, let me go back to something. Let's go way back in the past, not too far back. Okay, finding the angle measure. Focus your attention right here. This is similar to where we're at right now. And what we have to do is end up with the angle, and we'd say the measure of angle B is sine to the -1 of that ratio. It's exactly where we're at right now. In this second problem down here, again, this will look similar. How do you get to the measure of the angle? Other side is tangent to -1 of that ratio. Okay, so that's exactly what we're going to do right now. If I can find it again, all right. So, measure of angle theta is the cosine to the -1, again, we don't show multiplying both sides by 1 over cosine. You can if you want, knock yourself out. But usually we just put it on the other side of this ratio, 1 over 4.7531. So for most of your calculators, what you punch in, I believe, cosine the negative 1 first. And it usually gives you a parentheses right off the bat. So just do 1 divided by 4.7531 and close your parentheses, and you should have the measure of the angle. Andrew, what do you got? Let's go 1 decimal place. 77.9 degrees. Again, we always go to 1 decimal place for angles, 4 decimal places for the ratio. And if that would have rounded off to 78, we would put 78.0, showing we rounded off to 1 decimal place. Okay? All right, and that's the procedure. You just got to follow that all the way along the way. So here's another one. So you got the cotangent of alpha. Alpha is a popular angle symbol, and it equals negative 7.0008. So again, to get the equation, you got to think, what's the reciprocal ratio? And hopefully you say it's the cotangent. And again, I'm sorry, backwards. It's the tangent, because again, the tangent of alpha is 1 over the cotangent of alpha. So again, this is your equation. Why do we have to do this? Because we don't have a cotangent button, because we don't have a cosecant button, because we don't have a secant button. And rightly so, we don't need them. Okay, go ahead and finish it. See if you can finish it, reproduce what we just did, see if you can come up with the measure of the angle. Just trying to reproduce what we did up above. Oops. Come back. Come back wherever you are. All right. Hopefully you got negative 8.1 degrees. Questions on that? Noah? Okay, so did you take your equation and sub in the negative 7.008 for the cotangent of alpha? That's what we just said to do in red right up above. Did you write that in red on your notes? Good. Just look at your red. It should stand out. You got to sub in the value of the cotangent of alpha. Then how do you solve for the angle? It'll be tangent to the negative 1 on the other side of that 1 over negative 7.008. Okay, so let's try one more. Third time's the charm. Maybe you haven't gotten it yet. Go ahead and take C all the way from the beginning. Go ahead and solve C. Or I'm sorry, yeah, C. Say your answer on 3 if you got it. 1, 2, 3. All right. You guys love your fractions, don't you? Wow. Look, you have a calculator. There's really no, if you say, I don't know how to punch in 1 divided by 7/4, which really you should know, this is Algebra 2. Okay? How do you divide? Invert and multiply. Oh, that's very hard. Or punch it in, 1 divided by 7 divided by 4. Okay? What is hard about that? You're punching buttons. 1 divided by 7 divided by 4. Answer 34.8 degrees. If you want to know a shortcut, though, Whenever you're dividing a fraction by 1, you just simply give the inverse of the fraction. So if you don't want to punch in 1 divided by 7 divided by 4, just punch in 4/7. Okay, very, very simple. What does 1 over something mean? It's reciprocal. If I asked you the question, what's the reciprocal of 7/4? You wouldn't tell me 4/7? I would hope you would. So again, don't let something that is new, like a cosecant, make you not think of things you already know, like the reciprocal of 7/4. Okay? Don't let something new cause you to mess up. So again, Alex, you start it with an equation with the reciprocal function. You subbed in the value of 7/4 in for the cosecant of r. You know that to solve for the angle, it's going to be sine to the -1 on the other side of 1 over 7/4. It's all calculator, 34.8. All right, if you're still struggling with that, hopefully when you get to do some homework tonight, that will begin to come clear. The other way then is when you have to find the ratio. And remember, whenever we use our calculator, we're finding the ratio in decimal form. So in this situation, you're given the angle, and we've got to find the ratio. Well, we're in the same situation. Our calculator doesn't have a secant button, but it does have a cosine button. Our calculator doesn't have a cosecant button, but it does have a sine button. Our calculator doesn't have a cotangent button, but it does have a tangent button. All right, and so then it becomes a simple situation. We're still going to have the reciprocal ratio, but look at the difference. In this one, we keep what we're looking for as the main part. And we use it this way. The secant of 70 is 1 over the sine of 70. And that can be punched into a calculator. Punch this into your calculator. That's the answer. So you can do 1 divided by your sine button 70, or you can do the sine of 70 and hit your reciprocal button, which, by the way, every one of you have a reciprocal button. It's either a 1 over x button or an x to the -1 button is your reciprocal button. Each one of you have it. But again, if you don't even want to remember to use your reciprocal button, all you're doing is punching in 1 divided by the sine of 70 degrees. And again, you can punch in sine of 70 in your calculator. So most students think these are way easier than finding the angle. And I would have to agree. So we end up with the ratio, and I'm just going to write what secant of 70. And Andrew, what does your calculator say? All right, punched in something wrong. Try it again. 1 divided by sine 70. Mitchell, what does your calculator say? All right, either that's me wrong. Oh, duh. No wonder you guys are off. Does anybody have Kool-Aid out there? Anybody want to drink some Kool-Aid today? It'd be laced with some good stuff. All right, something's wrong. Anybody catch what's wrong? Why did you raise your hand? You just leave me here. Need your help. Amma, what's wrong? Say again? Yeah, it should be the cosine. Sorry about that, folks. Don't mean to drive you crazy and make it worse on you. But the reciprocal of the secant is the cosine, not the sine. And there's a glaring example on how if you use the wrong trig function, you will get the problem wrong. All right? You will. So be careful. Be careful. Be careful. All right, so 3 of you caught that. Why didn't you say something? Because you're not sure of yourself because this is new. Be sure of yourself. They're not terribly complicated. They are not. You just have to keep track of what you're doing. All right, try it again, Andrew. Punch in cosine this time, 70. Let's see if we can get you to the right place. Yeah, and again, this is a ratio. So how many places do we round ratios off to? 4. It's not an angle. And you got to keep track of what you're finding. You're not finding an angle, you're finding a ratio. You have to keep track of that. Ratio is a fraction. This ratio, listen now, is the hypotenuse divided by the adjacent side. And we're getting a decimal round off of 2.9238. 2.9238 because we do ratios to 4 decimal places. All right, see if you can follow that model and come up with the cotangent of 15. See if you can follow what we did to come up with the cotangent of 15. All right, Shane, what do you got? 3.7320. Yeah, and 321 if you round off, I believe, correctly. Cotangent of 15, 3.7321. Anybody else get that? Okay. All right, it's just 1 over the tangent of 15 degrees. That's all you're doing. And that is punchable into your calculator. You just punch that in. But you have to know that the cotangent is 1 over the tangent. Aiden? So again, it would be, you have two choices. You can use the 1 division bar, your tangent button, then 15, and then you may have to close your parentheses and hit enter. Or you can do the tangent of 15 and then use your 1 over x button, your reciprocal button, or then use your x over 1. Well, you'll have one of those two buttons on your calculator for the reciprocal. So it's two different ways. 1 divided by, and then tangent 15. I don't think you'll need a separate parentheses for the bottom, Aiden, but sometimes every calculator is a little bit different. Did you get it the first time? Okay. Okay, so yeah, I'm not sure what's up there. All right, questions. So let me go back. You've got to know these reciprocal relationships. The cosecant is 1 over the sine, which also means the sine is 1 over the cosecant. The secant is 1 over the cosine, which also means the cosine is 1 over the secant. And lastly, the cotangent is 1 over the tangent, which also means the tangent is 1 over the cotangent. Now, I know we're out of room, but I need to give you one other situation here. So hopefully you got a little bit of room. If not, maybe go on the back of the page, because I realize if I don't give this to you, then you're not going to know what to do here. So let me give you one more example. And we're just going to do one quick, simple example. What is this? 6. Find the secant of t. Find secant t in this kind of a situation. Draw yourself a right triangle. Let's put a 10 here. Let's put t here. And let's put a 7 here. Okay, now here's the difference. And this is what confuses students a little bit. And I understand it can be a little confusing. In this situation, when they give you this, they want you to find the ratio in fraction form. That's what they want from you. They gave you a triangle, and they want you to find the ratio in fraction form. So let's start off with, what ratio is the secant? And you may not know it yet in your head, but you go back to your front page of this lesson, and you say it's what over what? No, you don't want to say side. It's what side of a triangle over what side of a triangle is the secant. It's the hypotenuse over the adjacent. So in this kind of a situation, that's what they want you to give. So now you got to look at your triangle. So again, for a few of you, you guys still haven't caught on that I always circle the angle given. I noticed that the adjacent is here, so I'm going to call it x. I need this adjacent, and I need to know the hypotenuse, and of course the 10 is the hypotenuse. So I'm not ready to write the ratio. Now I may have been. If they gave me all the values of the triangle, I would simply put in whatever value the adjacent is and put it below whatever value the hypotenuse is. So in this case, I don't know what value the adjacent is. How am I going to get that value? How do you always get the third side of a right triangle when you know two sides? Aiden? Pythagorean theorem. So you're simply going to use the Pythagorean theorem on this thing. Square root of 10 squared minus 7 squared. Remember, whenever you're solving for the hypotenuse, it's always plus. Whenever you're solving for a side, it's the hypotenuse squared minus the side squared. So what do you get? 100 minus 49? So that's the square root of 51. Agreed? Now, you could find the measure of angle T right now if you wanted to, but that's not what they're asking you for. They're asking you for the actual ratio, and not in decimal form from your calculator, exactly from the triangle. So you're going to stick in the hypotenuse of 10, and you're going to stick in the adjacent of square root of 51. And what do you call the procedure to finish this? I've said it now a few times here in the last couple days. Say it if you know it. Meredith? You're going to rationalize the denominator, right? By multiplying the bottom by square root of 51, and whatever you do to the bottom, do the same thing to the top. So in this situation, we're going to end up with 10 times the square root of 51 over 51. 10 over the square root of 51 over 51. So again, that's tricky because students get confused in thinking, oh, does it want me to use my calculator here? Is this a calculator problem? No, in this situation, they want the ratio. So they want you to use the triangle and actually give the hypotenuse over the adjacent. Now, let me say one more thing. Beginning of this lesson yesterday, which this is all one lesson, I did it in two parts. We taught you how to find sine, cosine, and tangent of a 45-degree angle and give exact values. We taught you how to, from the pattern, find the sine, cosine, tangent of a 30-degree angle or a 60-degree angle and give the exact values. So guess what we want if we ask you for the cosecant of 60 degrees? I don't want your calculator decimal round off. I want the exact value from the pattern. So again, 30-degree angle, 45-degree angle, 60-degree angle. If we want the decimal form, I don't want the decimal form on exact. So let me just try to make this clear. You don't need to write this. Maybe they'll give you a problem like this. Secant 70 degrees. Okay, that's a calculator operation. You're going to get the ratio. You know the angle. There's the angle. You're going to get the ratio, and you're going to get it in decimal form. It's the only way to get it. But if they told you secant of 60, you are not going to use your calculator. You're going to use the pattern, and you're going to give the ratio as a fraction in exact value. So again, it's different when it's 30 degrees, 45 degrees, or 60 degrees. Those we have patterns for and we can get exact answers to. We don't want decimal round-offs. Capiche? All right, it's clear now. Whether it's clear later when you get to by yourself, we'll see. But that's what you got to remember. Exact values 30, 45, 60. Meredith?
So for like the secant 60, you would do it?
Yeah, I do the pattern. So I would be doing this, 60, 1, 2, square root of 3. The secant is the hypotenuse over the adjacent. So the hypotenuse is 2 and the adjacent is 1. Hey, look at that. The secant of 60 is actually 2. So even if you goofed up on that one, your calculator will give you exactly 2. But if it was the sine or the cosecant, then you wouldn't. You'd have a root in there. Okay? All right. Hope that's clear as mud. Here's your homework. Quiz tomorrow, by the way. This is page 407. Now let me try this one more time. Do not do degrees minutes, even though the book does. Okay? Give the angle to one decimal place in decimals. Don't convert to degrees minutes. Everybody got that? Don't convert to degrees minutes. So instead of saying, for example, 70 degrees, 30 minutes, say 70.5 degrees. Just what your calculator says. But when what your calculator says, that's the answer. Round it off to one decimal place. Okay. I want you to do number 8, 11 through 18, 23, 24, 31 through 35. Use the odds to help you understand. I'll be here after school if anybody needs help.